Hi, this is a tutorial on how to control the stabilization in After Effects. So we will work with the default tracker and let's track this footage. I have already done it. It was just a track motion. You can just do this one. Let's only do the position, and I have already done it here. I will choose only the position for now. And let's apply it on a new null object. So let's choose this target and let's apply on the X and Y. So this created position keyframes, and we now have a null object that is sticking to the footage. So how can you stabilize your footage with this tracking data? What happens if I parent my footage to the tracking data? So it's not stabilizing, it's actually doing the opposite thing. It's magnifying that motion of the camera. So let's undo that. So what I usually do is I alt click here to make an expression, and I just put a minus at the start. So now you cannot see the null object because it's now out of frame. It's actually here. So it's now mirrored or flipped by the 0, point. So that's why this is on a straight line. But this does not matter. We just want the motion of the null object and not the position, the absolute position of the null object. So if I now parent the footage to the tracking data, you can see that it is actually being stabilized. And let's make this more clear. Yeah. So this is actually stabilizing. But the problem with this is that you cannot control how much of the stabilization is happening. It's either on, like this, or it's either off, like this. You cannot set it to 50% or 10% or animate the percentage. So that's what I'm going to show you today. And in order to do this, let's delete everything that we've done and unparent everything. We will start by already having the tracking data. So the first step is to track the motion, not to stabilize the motion, just to track it. I will do this only in the position property, and you have to apply it to a null object, separate to your footage. So once you do that, don't parent anything just yet. So let's start writing an expression. So let's create a new variable by let and call it val. And let's save the current value. Let's now create some controller effects to use inside this expression. So I will select the tracking data and I will apply the slider control. I will also apply checkbox, and let's duplicate the slider 2 times. I first want to have this on top, and I will call it invert data. Then I want the actual strength of the stabilization. Let's put this on 100%. Actually, let's duplicate this and call it enabled. And let's leave these two for later. Let's assign the variable inside the expression. So I will write invert value and link this to invert data dot value. Let strength, call the strength slider value. But with this actually we need to divide it, because here we will work with the range between 0 and 100, but inside the expression we actually need from 0 to 1. because we are going to multiply this strength value. So this will help us get the desired result. So let's choose divided by 100 and enabled check and link to the enabled value. So first of all, let's check the enabled checkbox. So if this enabled checkbox is equal to 0, then we will return the exact value without changing anything. However, if it's not 0, so if it's 1, here we will control the strength. So I have a typo in there. So this actually doesn't do anything right now. We have to invert the keyframes first. So let's invert it first. So if invert value is 1, then get the value and multiply it by -1. So this will invert the value that is returned if the checkbox is checked. So now you'll have the null right here, but if I check the invert data, you will have the null right here. So the thing with parenting is that, first of all, when you parent something to something else, the child does not care about the absolute position of the parent, but it cares about the difference between the 0 frame and the current frame. So what I mean by 0 frame? So the frame on which you are while you're parenting your layers is playing a very important role on the behavior. So when you are on frame 150 here and you parent this layer to this layer, this frame, let's call it the 0 frame. So it's the frame in which nothing is happening. It's like it's not parented. Just for this frame, there is no change. If we go to any other frames, you will see it moving. But on the frame that we parented it, it's not moving. So let's see it on another frame too. So let's go here and parent it. So on this frame, it has no change on the frame. But if I go back to 150, it's now offset by the difference of the tracking data on these two frames. So let's unparent that and reset the position, and let's continue with the expression. So we need to implement this 0 frame inside the expression. However, we cannot access the frame in which we parented the layer from within the expression. So we need to implement this 0 frame separately. So I will call this slider 0 frame, and we will be manually setting this at the beginning. So let's define it here as well. And link it to the slider. So we now have to get the 0 frame position. So we need to get the position of this tracking data on this exact frame. So on the frame that we parented the layer. So let's create another variable 0 position, and let's set it as this property dot value at time. We currently have the frame number, so not the time, so let's convert it with frames to time, and let's write here 0 frame. So 0 position will contain the position at the time that we set here, which is the exact time that we parented the layer. we want this zero position in order to control the strength of the stabilization later. This position will actually have to be inverted as well. So let's do exactly the same thing. And now, to control the strength of the stabilization, we have to get the difference between the current value and the zero position. This is value minus zero position, and multiply it by the strength, which is from 0 to 1. However, we have to add the zero position at the beginning. So on whichever frame we are, we will start from the zero position and we will add the difference between the zero position and the current position multiplied by the strength. So this is how to control the strength. We have another slider here. Let's name it current frame. Let's create an expression and just write time to frames and add the time inside the function. So this way we will have the frame number here. So if you don't want to see the frames here, you will see them here, just for the reference. So let's see how this expression actually works now. Make sure you have invert data turned on and enabled turned off. So now if you go to a specific frame, in this case 240, you can parent the footage to this null object while the null object has inverted the data, and this will stabilize it just as in the beginning. However, now you can enable this checkbox and you can set the frame to 240. So this is your 0. And now you can control the strength as you wish. So now it does nothing because the strength is at 0. If I set a keyframe here up to here and set it to 100, the stabilization will slowly start to take effect. So on every frame you can set the strength to 0 and it will go back to the non-stabilized version. However, if you go to this exact frame, which is the 0 frame, it doesn't matter what the strength is, it will always be the reference frame for the stabilization, so this will not move. So let's make this as an animation preset so we can use it in the future. Disable the effect. Let's leave this enabled. And in order to create an animation preset, we'll have to delete the keyframes for now, because we don't want them to carry on to the animation preset file. So let's select the position and all these effects, and let's go to animation, save animation preset, and I will save it to my animation preset folder. So before I apply this, let's delete the null object, reset the position, and let's go to the track motion and re-enable this tracker that I tracked prior to this tutorial, and let's get the transform and the position. So if I create a null object now, let's call this tracking data, I can now apply this tracking data to this target, to the X and Y, and I can now go to the effects and presets, double click on this animation preset we just made. So let's choose 12 seconds. I go to this frame, which is the reference or 0 frame, make sure the invert data is on and enabled is off. Parent the footage to the null object, set the frame to the current frame because we are currently at the 0 frame or the reference frame, so 360 for me, and now enable the expression. So now nothing is happening, but if I set the strength to 100, it gets stabilized and you can animate this property. So you can choose how much stabilization you get.